Buonasera signore e signore, benvenuti alla Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò della New York University. We are delighted to have you here tonight for this performance that is part of the Warren and Patricia Benson Forum on Creativity and is also part of a long-standing collaboration with the Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester, collaboration that was born in the last academic year with a series that we called Recita Cantando and that emphasized the relationship between literature, Italian culture, and music. And it was that series originally conceived by Professor Elena Bellina, who is an alumna of our Department of Italian Studies and now a professor at the University of Rochester, and I would like to thank her for the support that she provided throughout the series. This specific event is curated by Professor Carlos Sanchez-Gutierrez, who is a professor of composition at the University of Rochester, and he's going to come to the stage in just a few minutes to introduce the evening and give you some fundamental information about it. I just would like to say that we are delighted that Carlos decided to work himself and have his students work on the text of one of the most important and beloved writers of the 20th century, not only in Italy but throughout the world, Italo Calvino. Italo Calvino, as you know, is one of the few Italian authors that you find in translation in any American bookstore. Try to find another one, maybe Umberto Eco, and that's about it. The fundamental importance of Calvino, not only in literature, but also in a new understanding of modernity, is of fundamental importance. We had here a presentation last semester of the English translation of a selection of his letters. And once again, even in the private letters, the letters that he wrote to his friends, to other writers, to members of his family, his incredible intellectual stature emerged in a very, very unique way. We're also fortunate that every now and then we can count on his daughter, Giovanna Calvino, that is not here yet, but she's coming, as a member of our faculty here in the Department of Italian Studies at New York University. So the reason for us to be delighted to have here such a significant component of the students at the Eastman School of Music, along with members of our own theater company in residence, KEEP, are many. And without further ado, you're here for a performance that is going to last about an hour and 30 minutes, no intermission. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Professor Carlos Sanchez-Gutierrez to come to the stage and tell us something about the performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. Good evening. After what Stefano said, there's very little left for me to say, other than thank you, Casa Italiana, New York University. Thank you, the Benson family, for their support, for making this possible. Thank you very much to the Eastman BroadBand Ensemble, which I have the enormous joy to co-direct, and to keep Kairos Italy Theater for what you're about to see. Quick note, indeed, the works that you will hear tonight were all specifically composed for this, or under the guiding light of Calvino. My works were not specifically composed for this event, but they have a lot to do with Calvino. But the other 6 works by very talented student composers were all written for this occasion. We premiered this event at the Eastman School of Music on Friday last week, and it's not theater with incidental music. Rather, the theater and the music go on parallel lines, occasionally intersecting and occasionally going in very different directions. But they all have to do with what, for each of the composers represented in this concert/theater play, represents the essence of Calvino's ideas and Calvino's imagination and incredibly fantastic thinking. There's indeed no intermission, so if you didn't have a chance to go to the restroom, you are too late now. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you very much again to these wonderful performers and to the great composers whose names are listed here. And by the way, you might want to refer to the little list of works here that is titled, "This is the order in which tonight's composition will be presented," because this is the right order in which the works will be presented tonight. And without any further ado, thank you very much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm sorry, one more very quick piece of advice. Please do not applaud in between works. We would like to wait until the end of the performance to hear your applause or to collect enough vegetables for a good salad. Thank you.
There was a war.
Against the Turks. C'era una guerra contro i turchi. My uncle was in his first youth.
The age in which confused feelings.
Not yet sifted.
All rush into good and bad.
The age in which every new experience...
Even the macabre and the most inhuman.
Is palpitating and warm with love of life.
My uncle Medardo went to sleep late that night.
He walked up and down near his tent.
Heard calls of sentries.
Neighs of horses.
Broken speech of soldiers in sleep.
He gazed up at the stars of Bohemia.
And thought of his new rank.
Of the battle next day.
Of his distant home.
Of the rustling reeds in its brooks.
He felt no nostalgia or doubt.
Or apprehension.
Things were still indisputably whole.
As he was himself.
Could he have foreseen the dreadful fate awaiting him?
He might have even found it quite natural.
With all its pain.
The battle began.
Punctually at 10 a.m. in the morning.
La battaglia cominciò puntualmente alle 10 del mattino.
It's no greater fun
than having enemies.
And then finding out they are like one thought. My uncle flung himself into the melee.
The fate of battle was uncertain.
In the confusion, it seems that the Christians are winning
They had certainly broken the Turkish lines.
and changed some of their positions.
My uncle, with other bold spirits,
Even got closer to the enemy guns.
As the Turks were moving their cannons to keep the Christians under fire.
2 of the Turkish artillerymen were pivoting a cannon.
With their
With the slow movements,
beards,
long ropes. They look like two.
a pair of
Astronomers.
My uncle said,
Adesso arrivo lì e li aggiusto io. Now I'll go there and knock them around.
In his enthusiasm
And in experience,
he did not know,
that cannons are to be approached.
only by the side,
or the breech, he leapt in front of the muzzle.
with his sword bared,
Thinking it would frighten the 2 astronomers.
instead of which,
They fired a cannonade.
Right in his chest.
Medardo of the Alba
Jumped
into the air.
I was free as air, since I had no parents and belonged to the category neither of servants nor masters. I was part of the Medarda family, only by tardy recognition, but no one bothered to give me his name and my mother. My poor mother. Yeah. She had been the Viscount Adolfo's daughter and Medardo's elder sister. But she has besmirched the family honor by eloping with a poacher, who was my father. So, I was born in a poacher's hut, in rough undergrowth by the woods, and shortly afterward my father was killed in some squabble. And Pelagra put an end to my mother, who had stayed in that wretched hut all alone. So I was brought into the castle, as my grandfather, the Viscount Adolfos, took pity on me. And I grew up under the care of the chief nurse, Sebastiana. I remember that when Medardo was still a boy and I was a small child, he would sometimes let me take part in his games, as if we were of equal rank. And when Medardo made his return to Terralba, I was 7 or 8 years old. It was late, after dusk in October, and the sky was cloudy. There's Master Medardo! Back! The body in the litter was seen to give uno sforzo angoloso e convulso. And before our eyes, Medardo di Terralba jumped to the ground, leaning on a crutch. A black cloak and hood covered him. Dal capo fino ai piedi. The right-hand part of his body was thrown back, showing off his face and body, while on the left side, everything was hidden and wrapped.
Travolto nelle pieghe e nei lembi di quell'ampio drappeggio.
Oh, my boy, cried old Sebastiana, and raised her arms. Meschinetto.
My uncle, annoyed at making such an impression, advanced the point of his crutch on the ground, and with a hope pushing himself towards the wing of the castle.
He brushed past the litter bearer with little jumps on his single foot and went up the stairs through the great open gate giving into the interiors of the castle and pushed his crutch at both heavy doors which struck with a cloud. And as the wicket gate remained open, he slammed that too, and he vanished from our eyes.
We continued to hear the alternating tap of foot and crutch on the ground from inside, moving down passages towards the wing of the castle where his private apartments lay, and also the banging and bolting of doors.
The bed out of Medardo, has returned.
For me, those were happy times. Wandering through woods with Dr. Trelawney in search of fossil traces.
Dr. Trelawney was English. He reached the coast thanks to a shipwreck astride a ship's barrel. All his life he's been a ship's doctor, went on many, many perilous journeys with the very famous Captain Cook. Although he never seen anything of the world because he was always under hatches playing cards.
He's special for will-o'-the-wisps.
Took them on many long marches to villages nearby where it was said that he had seen flames of a finer shape, color, and size than the one in our abandoned cemetery.
At that time, my Uncle Medardo went round on horseback. Whenever the sound of his horse's hoofs was heard, everyone took to his heels, even more than when Galateo, the leper, passed, and more of children and animals.
One day, when the doctor was fishing with a net for will-o'-the-wisps, his eyes fell on Medardo of Taralba, who was pasturing his horse near the tombs. The doctor was confused and alarmed.
Il Visconte gli si fece vicino e gli chiese:
In the distorted tone of his half-mouth.
Lei cerca farfalle notturne, dottore?
Not quite butterflies, you see. Will-o'-the-wisps, you know? Will-o'-the-wisps.
Già, i fuochi fatui. Spesso anch'io me ne sono chiesta l'origine.
They have been the subject of my modest studies for quite some time, replied the doctor, encouraged by his benevolent tone.
Il Visconte Medardo contorse in un sorriso la sua mezza faccia angolosa, dalla pelle tesa come un teschio. Come studioso, ella merita ogni aiuto. Peccato che questo cimitero, abbandonato com'è, non sia un buon campo per i fuochi fatui. Le prometto che domani stesso provvederò ad aiutarla per quanto mi è possibile.
Next day was the one allocated for administering justice, and the Viscount
Il Visconte!
condemned a dozen of peasants to death because, according to his computation, they had not handed over the whole proportion of crops due from them to the castle. The dead men were buried in a common grave, and the cemetery blossomed every night with numerous will-o'-the-wisps.
The doctor was terrified by his help, as useful as it was to his studies.
Medardo's evil nature even turned against him and his property, its castle. A fire went up on the servants' wing and spread among the loud shriek of those trapped there. It was an attempt on the life of his nurse and foster mother, Sebastiana. One night, the door of the room where she was lying opened and the Viscount appeared by her bed.
Che cosa sono quelle macchie sulla vostra faccia? Voglia.
Marks of your sins, son.
La vostra pelle screziata e stravolta. Che male avete?
My ailments are nothing compared to yours, son. Compared to what is waiting for you in hell if you don't mend your ways.
Dovreste guarire presto. Non vorrei si sapesse in giro di questo male che avete.
I'm not out for a husband that I have to care about my looks. A good conscience is enough for me.
Eppure...
I wish you could say the same.
Il vostro sposo v'aspetta per portarvi via con sé stanotte. Non lo sapete?
Do not deride old age, my son, you who have had your youth ruined.
No scherzo, Vania! Ascoltate, c'è il vostro fidanzato che suona sotto la vostra finestra.
Sebastiana listened, and just outside the castle, she heard the sound of the leper's horn.
Indomani il Visconte mandò a chiamare il dottor Triloni. Ma che sospette sono comparse sul viso di una nostra vecchia servente. Tutti abbiamo paura che sia lepra. Ci affidiamo ai lumi della sua sapienza.
The doctor bowed and stuttered. Medici, my lord, at your orders, as always. He turned, slipped out of the castle, got himself a small barrel of cancaroni wine, and left for the woods. He was not seen again for a whole week.
When he got back, old Sebastiana has been sent to the leper's village.
The people who must attract me now were the Huguenots up on Col Jericho. They were people who had escaped from France, where the king had those who hold their religion cut into small pieces.
Inexpert to what constituted sin, they multiply their prohibition lest they make mistakes, and were resolved to give each other constant severe glances in the case that the least movement would betray a blameworthy intention. On top of the chalky terraces, with a few stunted vines and wretched crops, would rise
a voice of old Ezekiel, with his fists raised to the sky, his white trembling goatee beard, his eyes rolling under his tubular hat. Famine and plague! Famine and plague! He would shout to his family, bent over their work, and would give them thousands of commands and orders with a tone that one would use in addressing a bunch of inept wasters. Every time, after shouting the many things that they had to do in order to prevent the land from going to ruin, he would begin doing them himself, still shouting and pushing around, famine and plague! One knock was heard on the door in this storm. Who knocks in this weather? Quick, open! When they opened the door, on the threshold there was Medardo di Terralba, leaning on his one leg, wrapped in a dripping cloak. His plumed hat. Ho legato il mio cavallo nella vostra stalla. Vi prego, date ospitalità anche a me. La notte è brutta per il viandante. In this house, the guest is always welcome. You can sit there by the fire. On the threshold there was a heap of sheets, the kind of which one would use in spreading under a tree to gather olives. There, Medardo lay down and fell asleep. The old man raised his fists to the ceiling.
He shouted, in the tone that one would use in shouting, who scarcely emits any sound, and still does it with all his strength.
No guest in this house shall be unrespected. I will protect myself, his sleep. And with this musket he took place near the sleeping Viscount. Medardo's eye opened.
Che fate, Mastro Bicchiere?
I guard you in your sleep. You are
hated by many.
Lo so! Non dormo al castello perché ho paura che I miei servi mi uccidano nel sonno.
You are not loved here either. But tonight, you will be respected.
Ezechiele, voglio convertirmi alla vostra religione.
The old man said nothing.
la sella del suo cavallo saltatore. Medardo di Terralba saliva e scendeva per le valse di buon'ora, scrutando valle con occhio rapace.
And this is how I came to see Pamela in the middle of a field with her guts.
Ecco che tra i miei acuti sentimenti non ho nulla che corrisponda a quello che gli interi chiamano amore. Se per loro un sentimento così immenso ha pur tanta importanza, quello che per me potrà corrispondere adesso sarà certo magnifico e terribile.
One day, while going back home at midday, she noticed that all the daisies in the field had only half petal, as the other half has been stripped off. Oh dear me, said Pamela, of all the girls in the vineyard, this should happen to me. As she realized that the Viscount had fallen in love with her. But that butterfly, with a wing and half body, crashed by a stone. Pamela let out a shriek and called her father and mother!
Io, Pamela, ho deciso di essere innamorato di te.
And this is why you're torturing all the creatures of nature?
Nessun altro linguaggio abbiamo per parlarci se non questo. Ogni incontro fra due esseri al mondo è uno sbranarsi. Vieni con me, io ho la conoscenza di questo male e con me sarai più sicura che con chiunque altro, perché io faccio del male come tutti lo fanno, ma io, a differenza degli altri, io ho la mano sicura.
The Viscount drew slowly his thin bony hand near Pamela's cheek. The hand was trembling, and it was not clear if it was stretched to caress or to scratch. He had not yet touched her when he drew it back and got up.
È al castello che ti voglio. Vado a preparare la torre in cui tu vivrai. Ti lascio ancora un giorno per pensarci, poi dovrai prendere la tua di decisione.
So the castle I want you. I'm going to prepare the tower you're going to live in. I'll give you one day and then you have to make up your mind. Pamela that night slept in her hammock swung between olive and fig. And in the morning, horror! She found a little carcass in her lap. It was a half squirrel, cut long ways, as usual, but with its fluffy tail intact. Oh, poor me, said Pamela. Oh, to her parents. The Viscount just won't leave me alone.
Her father and her mother passed the carcass of the squirrel from hand to hand. He left the tail whole, said the father. That must be a good sign. Oh, maybe he's becoming to be good, replied the mother. He always cuts everything in half, but, said the father, the loveliest thing in a squirrel, he respects that. Oh, perhaps that's what the message means. It'll mean that you will respect what's good and beautiful about you.
she kept on asking me. I was panting with running and impatience and gave her a confused account.
Ma'am, the old nurse was more interested in Medardo's bite than his act of goodness. So, a red spider, you say? I should have some herb. Yeah. Is gone good, you say? Well, he always was, in some way. You know, if one knew how to take him. Let's see, where did I put this herb? You just poultice it. Yeah, Medardo. He was always scatterbrained since he was child. Oh, here is the herb. Yeah, he always was. And when he got hurt, he'd come and saw by his nurse. So, how deep is this bite?
His left hand is all swollen up.
You silly boy! Laughed the nurse. The left hand, huh? Where is Medardo's left hand? He left it in Bohemia with those Turks. May the devil take them. He left it with the left side of his body.
Yes, of course. and yet, he was there. I was here, and he had his hand turned around like this. How can that be?
Can't you tell left from right anymore?
News! News! Now news of Medardo's double nature began coming from various sources.
Children lost in their woods were approached to their tenure by the half-man with a crutch, who led them home by the hand and gave them figs, flowers, and sweets. Poor widows were helped across brooks by him. Dogs bitten by snakes were tended.
At the same time, appearance of the Viscount half wrapped in his black cloak were also a signal for dire events. Children were kidnapped and later found in prison in caves blocked by stones. Branches broke off and rocks against old women.
For some time, the Viscount's crossbow had been used only against swallows in such a way as not to kill, but only wound and stun them. But now they were seen in the sky.
With legs bandaged and tied to splints, or with wings stuck together or waxed. A whole swarm of swallows, so treated, were prudently flying about together, like a convalescents from a bird hospital. And
there was an incredible rumor that Medardo was their doctors. Now, this is Medardo's story, as Pamela heard it that night. Well, it was not true that a cannonball blew his body into bits. It split it into two halves. One was found by the army stretcher bearer, and the other one remained under a pyramid of Christian and Turkish corpses and was not found. A night through the battlefields passed two hermits, whether faithful to true religion or necromancers is not certain. Well, as happens in many wars, these two were living in the no man's land between battlefields, and as some say nowadays, they were trying to embrace at the same time the Christian Trinity and the Allah of Mahomet. Well, in their peculiar piety, in finding Medardo's half, they brought it to their den, and with balsams and ointments made by them, they tended and saved it. And as the strength was reestablished, the wounded man bid them farewell, and on his crutch, he walked for for months, for years, throughout all the nations of Christendom, trying to reach his castle, amazing people along the way with his act of goodness.
Oh, Pamela, questo è il bene dell'essere dimezzato, il capire d'ogni persona e cosa al mondo la pena che ognuno e ognuna ha per la propria incompletezza. This is the right thing of being have. One understands the sorrow of every person and thing in the world at its own incompleteness. I was whole and did not understand, and I moved deaf and unfeeling through the sorrows and the pains of the world. But now I have a brotherhood that before I did not understand. Pamela, io non sono l'unico a essere qui dimezzato e divelto, ma tu pure. Tutti. I'm not here, the only one split in two, but you two, and everyone else too. I have a brotherhood now that I did not before. If you come with me, Pamela, you learn to suffer of everyone else, and you tend your own by tending theirs.
It's all very nice, said Pamela. But I am in a great pickle because of the other half of you being in love with me, and I don't know what he wants to do with me.
Anch'io, Pamela, sono innamorato di te.
Well, what should we do?
Io direi di andare dai tuoi genitori, poverini, e aiutarli nelle loro faccende.
Oh, you go if you want to.
Certo che ho voglia, cara.
I stay here, she said. Stopped near her duck and her goat.
Pamela, l'unico modo che abbiamo per amarci è aiutare il mondo.
A pity. I thought there were other ways.
Addio, cara. Ti porterò della torta di mele.
I don't know why I get all these types like those.
The good un's reputation reached even the Huguenots, and one could see from the highest terrace of the Yellow Vineyard old Ezekiel standing
and gazing down at the mule path from the valley.
Father, I see you gazing at the mule path from the valley as if you were waiting for someone.
'Tis man's lot to wait and die. Just man with truth, unjust man with fear.
Is the lame on the other leg going to come and visit us? There's no one else being spoken about down in the valley but the halfman. You think he's going to come here to us?
If ours is the land of those who live in the right, and he is the man that lives in the right, there is no reason he should not come.
Father, the cripple there is just as crippled as the other one. Is opposite in body and soul, kind as the other one is evil. Is he the visitor whom your words announced?
It is every traveler on every road, and so he too.
Old Sebastiana was the only one never moved by the act of goodness of the good heart. Maybe because of her maternal instinct, maybe because her old age was starting to cloud her mind, but she never took into consideration Medardo's separation into two halves. Why? Why did you cut all the Granny Bigin's chicken's head? Huh? Huh? Poor woman, it's everything she had.
Ma perché lo dite a me, Baglia? Sapete che non sono stato io?
Yeah, right, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. And so, who was it?
Io, ma...
Ah, I see, you see?
Ma non io! Qui!
Right. But do you think because I'm old, I'm also slow? I hear some rascality, I can tell at once if it's something that you have done. And I always say, I bet Medardo's head is in that.
Ma sbagliate sempre.
Right, I'm mistaken. For you, young people, the old one are always mistaken. So, who gave your crutch to old Isidoro?
Io? Quello sono stato io.
He used it to beat up his wife, poor woman.
Ma lui mi aveva detto che non riusciva a camminare per la gotta.
He was pretending. And you at once go and give him your crutch, right? And now he broke it into his wife's bed. And you go around with a bench and fix it. Where is your head? What's wrong with you? Oh, you are always like this, always like this. And why did you get Bernardo's bull drunk with grappa?
Ma quello non sono stato io!
It wasn't me. They always say like that. But it's always him. It's the Viscount.
Now, even the Huguenots started taking turns in order to protect themselves from him.
Che non aveva più rispetto verso di loro e andava in giro a spiare a tutte le ore nei loro granai per vedere quanti sacchi vi fossero e poi faceva prediche sui prezzi troppo alti e dopo andava a dirlo in giro rovinando i loro commerci.
Thus, the days went by at Terralba, and our sensibilities became numbed. And we felt ourselves lost between an evil and a virtue, equally inhuman. Pamela e il Visconte devono unirsi in matrimonio!
Pamela and the Viscount must unite in holy matrimony. Pamela, here, it is time for you to marry that vagabond they call the good aunt. Oh, he compromised to us, so he shall marry you. Besides, if you ask him, he's so kind he won't say no. Pamela, 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 it is time that you said yes to the Viscount, the bad aunt, on condition that he marries you in church. Who gave you this idea, huh? Was it yours or someone else's? Wouldn't you like to become Viscountess? Well, answer me. Oh, all right. Imagine, it was told to me by the best-hearted man in the whole world. The vagabond they call the good aunt.
Will you marry Pamela?
I don't know. I really don't know. What is going to happen? Will it go well? Will it go badly?
Then at dawn, the horse, urged to a gallop, was lamed in already, so the Bedon could not get at the wedding in time. On the other side, the mule went slowly and carefully, so the good aunt reached the church punctually, just as the bride arrived with her train, held by me.
The crowd was a bit disappointed that the only bridegroom that showed up was the good aunt. But the marriage was celebrated. The rings were passed, both bride and groom said,
Yes.
and the priest said, Bedardo Alba e Pamela Marcolfie now join you in the holy matrimony.
Il Visconte Medardo di Terralba sono io e Pamela è mia moglie.
No, il Visconte che ha sposato Pamela sono io.
You know what? I'm going back to the woods.
The duel was fixed for the next day at dawn in the nuns'
Il duello fu fissato per l'indomani all'alba al prato delle monache.
It was a greenish dawn.
C'era l'alba verdastra.
Both the thin black duelists were standing on the field with swords at ready.
Sul prato i due sottili duellanti neri erano fermi con le spade sull'attenti.
The leopard blew his horn.
Il leproso succhiò il corno.
It was the sign.
Era il segnale.
The sky was quivering like taut tissue.
Il cielo vibrava come una membrana tesa.
Mortise in their layers
Gli
still
iri
clawed
militari
into soil.
strisero le unghie.
Magpies
Gli
with
affrontarono
eggs under their wings
negati
tore
senza
feathers
togliere
from
il
their
capo
sides and
sotto l'ala.
hurt
Si
themselves.
strapparono una
Wolves
penna
mounted
facendosi
ate
dolore.
their
Il lombrico
tails.
morse la
Snakes
coda.
cut themselves with their
La
own
pipra si
teeth.
forse con i suoi
Rats
denti.
broke their sting onto stones,
L'ape
and everything turned
ruppe il
against
pungiglione contro la
itself.
pietra. Ogni cosa si avventava contro di sé.
Frost lay in swells,
La
licking
pietra
to
ghiacciava nelle
stone and
pozze.
stone to
Le
licking.
lichene
Dry leaves to
si mutavano in
mold,
pietra e le pietre in lichene.
and trees filled with thick
La foglia
hard
secca diventava dura.
fat. So, man moved against himself
Così l'uomo s'avventava contro di sé.
with both hands armed with one sword.
Con entrambe le mani armate di una sola spada.
At a certain point, they found each other sword guard to sword guard. Their wooden legs were stuck in the ground like stakes. The Bedon freed himself with a start, and as he was falling and losing his balance, he managed to give a swing, not quite close to his adversary, but very close, where the adversary was ending, and so close that one could not see if it was on this side or the other side. But soon, the body under the cloak grew purple with blood, and there was no more doubt. The Godon swayed, and as he fell, he too, with one last large movement, managed to attack his rival from his head to his abdomen, from where the bat-on was not, and where the bat-on might have been. Now, the bat-on was bleeding all over the ground where the old wound was. Both duelists had burst open their lungs' veins and reopened the wound that split them in two. A half an hour later, the doctor and the others brought one single wounded man back to the castle. It was bound very tightly for the doctor to care to put all the guts and all the arteries together so they would correspond, and then used miles and miles of bandages to tighten so tightly together that it looked more like an ancient embalmed corpse rather than a wounded man. Said, now he's healed.
And Pamela exclaimed, finally I have a husband with everything complete.
At least
my uncle Medardo became a whole man again. Neither good nor bad, but a mixture between goodness and badness. That is apparently not dissimilar to what he had been before the halving.
But having had the experience of both halves, each on its own, made it so that he was bound to be more wise.
He had a happy life, many children, and a just rule.
Obviously, the old viscount is not enough to make all the world whole.
I, though amid all this fervor of wholeness, felt myself growing sadder and more lacking.
Sometimes one who feels incomplete is merely young.
I had reached the threshold of adolescence, but would still sit amid the roots of great trees and tell myself stories.
One pine needle could represent a knight, or a lady, or a jester.
I make them move before my eyes, and I entertain myself with interminable stories.
Then I would be overcome with shame at these fantasies and would run off.
I was left behind in this world full of responsibilities and will-o'-the-wisps.
Ma già le navi stavano scomparendo all'orizzonte e io rimasi qui.
In questo nostro mondo pieno di responsabilità e di fuochi fato.